I want to talk about an extremely fucking frustrating topic, that being faith in addiction recovery. Now, I want to go into the stating just so you know it is kind of a rant. It's something that frustrates me and affects me personally. However, I will still be citing sources for the things I say. Just going to start off with a little background on me regarding this topic and why I'm even bringing it up. I am a borderline person who struggles with addiction. And I really, partially because of this, but not entirely, do not have any desire to fix that right now. I am also Cherokee, and that will come into play in a minute, both in regards to the way that some faith based organizations treat tobacco and in the way that addiction is a very prominent issue in Native communities due to generational trauma, as well as just poverty and lack of support on reservations. Now, the thing that prompted me to look at this was looking for help for recovery and finding this just absolutely infuriating faith based rehab center, which went on to prove my point I made in my anti theism video about how losing your faith, whenever that's what prompted your recovery, can also result in losing said sobriety. Before I go into this, I do want to address the criticism that Simple Nicks gave to my views on this topic, because I do think it was a really good point. However, the statistics are generally on my side, and I will go over that in a minute. Essentially, what he said was that, yes, religion can be the reason someone gets sober, but they can still gain that value on their own independent of the religion. And the example he gave was a kid could be pressured to go to college their whole life, but independently decide that that's a value they hold as well. And then, regardless of if their parents care when they're older, still proceed to go to college. And I think that's both a great example and a great point. So I want to acknowledge, yes, it's true. There are probably millions of addicts who have become non religious or become just generally spiritual or something who have maintained sobriety. And I want to make that very clear that that was a good point. It just does not negate the fact that this does happen and the other issues I have with faith based recovery outside of that. Now, this website I'm talking about completely demonizes any kind of substance use in any context. The examples it gives are tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana, all of which can be fine in moderation. And again, there comes my issue with the tobacco thing, is tobacco is a very important, or plays a very important role in Native communities and is often used as kind of a trading thing. Pipes can be considered very sacred to some people, and demonizing tobacco altogether is just really gross. And I don't think it's intentional because a lot of people don't know that, but it is uninformed. And for an entire recovery center, I would think they would try and do better, as well as medical uses for marijuana, whether or not it's prescribed. And the fact that drinking in moderation is fine. It's okay to go to a bar with your friends. It's okay to get a mimosa at brunch and shit. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And though it doesn't cite any sources, at least that I could find, it says that Christian people, or specifically Christian people who say religion is very important to them, have a 10% lower rate of even using the substance at all, as compared to just religious people who say religion is not very important to them. I will be linking this in the description, by the way. Now, I do want to note, I think the end goal of this, of people not using substances for the most part, is a good thing. And as I've said, I am a consequentialist. I think intentions are not um, the most important thing. I think the result is. However, my issue here is the fact that the intentions also inform the result, a result that seems good on the surface, but really is not, because the emotional response to it is also a result of it. That being the fact that this lack of substance use is not the result of proper drug education. It's not the result of teaching people how to drink responsibly or whatever. It's the result of shame. It's things like Telltale on YouTube getting disfellowshipped and losing his whole family for smoking a cigarette. I'd like to compare it to like religious abstinence only education. It's not teaching you how to be responsible with these things and why they're bad to do. It's teaching you about, essentially, if you do this thing, you're going to get in trouble. And while I'm sure there are some religious organizations or churches or whatever that are giving proper drug education, this is generally not the case, as most pastors and priests get very minimal mental health training, um, and as such are not qualified to even be talking about this. Now, there's also the aspect that I made, that I brought up at the beginning and that I made in the video where I kind of offhandedly talked about this. That being loss of faith leading to loss of sobriety. The website actually talks about this and admits it is a problem. However, the solution it comes up with is trying to re-indoctrinate these people. And as I'm sure you know if you've been subbed to this channel, I'm an anti-theist. I think religion is inherently harmful. I think losing your faith is a good thing. And the solution to that problem should not be re-indoctrinate these people so that they can properly feel that shame of addiction again, or that bullshit 12 steps I'm helpless without God shit, but to give them harm reduction in the meantime, to detox them depending on what they're on, to get to the root of the issue and get therapy, to go to somewhere like a rehab or a halfway house or something where drug or alcohol or whatever use is just not an option. It is not to bring them back to the church so that they can have their shaky, shame-based sobriety. And I mean, again, I do think the outcome matters, which I will say is not a good one anyway. 1 in 15 people become sober at all from the 12-step program, and only 5 to 10% of those people stay sober. So even in regards to it being successful, it's not. But then there also comes the fact that their intentions are not pure. They're not doing these things with solely the intention of helping mentally ill and traumatized people get healthy, but they are using that mental illness to bring people into the church. The end goal is not you'll be sober no matter what your beliefs are. The end goal is you'll be sober and you'll be in the church. And the thing is, secular recovery centers are, like, at least where I live in the South, a rarity. Religion and addiction recovery in America are so heavily intertwined that it may as well be politics. And I'm not saying religion can't play a role in recovery. I mean, I've been to the psych ward countless times, and the one that I go to anyway has a chaplain that just comes in and will give a general, all religion inclusive, spiritual place to pray, to talk about God, they'll bring various religious texts and stuff. And I've just sat in on it out of curiosity, just not participating, sitting in the corner and drawing, just to hear what goes on in these, because usually people who don't want to be there will leave the room. Also, I'm sorry if my voice sounds shaky, I'm very jittery. And stuff like that is great. I think regardless of your religious affiliation, and regardless of if it's addiction recovery or the psych ward or whatever, I think they should have access to practicing their religion, regardless of how I feel about the fact that that religion exists. But there's a difference between just continuing to practice your pre-existing religion and basing your recovery on that addiction. Even for religious people, I don't think religious recovery centers are the best solution, because those centers, again, are not basing your recovery on science. They're not basing it on like getting you away from that environment. They're not fixing the root of the problem. They're replacing one addiction with another. They're replacing drugs or alcohol or whatever with God. And again, if you lose that faith, there's a good chance you'll lose the recovery too. And again, even this religious website talks about that, with their solution being, let us re-indoctrinate you. And I mean, I think it almost aligns with missionaries, like particularly Mormons, who will go do charity work, who will go build houses, work at a food bank, something of the sort. But the thing is, you got to listen to their shit about Jesus the whole time. You can't, they're not doing it solely to help underprivileged people. They're doing it to use that lack of privilege to bring them into the church, to grow their numbers. And while obviously I don't think Mormons going on missions think that teaching people about the Book of Mormon is a bad thing, they don't know it's a cult, they don't know that it's not true. So that's not necessarily me saying that they're like intentionally going, I can use this to my advantage. They're going, oh, let's do something to help them and make them religious because they think being religious is a good thing. But it's still a problem that their goals aren't help people, their goals are create more religious people. And I mean, again, the fact that secular or even just non-Christian recovery options are extremely limited. And I mean, as a Native person, of course, there are Native Christians. My grandpa recently became Christian because my step-grandma, who's very white, lives in Missouri, is Christian. So, I mean, obviously there are Christian Native people, but like we don't have a lot of options either, even though addiction is a real problem in our communities. And the government doesn't care to help us. It doesn't give a shit about us. And those of us who are spiritual and want to maintain that spirituality and respect that don't have options. And those of us who are non-religious also don't have options, especially because of just the high rates of poverty in Native communities and AA being one of the only free recovery options. And it's one with an extremely low success rate that you have to believe in God for. I don't think mental health treatment in any form should be tied to religion at all. I don't think there should be religion-based therapies, period, regardless of if you're religious. If you want to incorporate that yourself, that's fine. But whenever you base your recovery on religion, regardless of if it's even addiction or not, it's a problem. I have friends who are religious who have gone to religious therapists and have actively complained about them. If you know who Jimmy Snow is, I don't know if he has a whole video on this or if he just periodically brings it up. He went to a religious therapist whenever he was a Mormon that like just did jack shit and was awful. It's like going to church instead of going to therapy, instead of going to rehab, instead of going to whatever. And like, well, yes, there are, I would hope, qualified professionals at these religious rehabs and stuff. Again, ulterior motives and not getting to the root of the issue, but replacing that issue with God. Addiction, to be frank, goes away by treating the cause of the issue, the root of the problem, the trauma that put you there, the living situation you have, the people you surround yourself with, whatever that is what fixes addiction, is treating the root of the problem. I mean, even with like eating disorders and stuff, which as someone who's had an eating disorder are addictions, treating the root of the problem treats the addiction, not replacing the addiction with God. Honestly, all I got, that was kind of more just a rant, but it's something that has affected me personally, and that is absolutely infuriating and honestly kind of disgusting to me. So, yeah, that's all. Have a good day, guys.
I stare at the populace in